But the most fun stuff was when we played live instruments in the room. And sometimes we played instruments that we didn't know how to play. Like I played flute on a lot of stuff in Courage. I don't know how to play flute. So I go, it was like, what the hell is that sound? I don't know. So it was experimental and fun. And, Andy and I would laugh and laugh. John would come in and he would say, that sucks or something. He would never say that, but he would force us to do something else. It was a constant thing. It was like a big sandbox, and we just went crazy. And we were really lucky in that, speaking of Linda Semensky was a big advocate of John. And she got John the gig, I guess. I don't know how it all worked out. But at the end of the day, one of the things that John did, which was really cool, was he wanted to pay tribute to Linda for helping him out. So he had Muriel play sitar, which Linda Semensky played.
Really?
So that is Linda Semensky in most of those sequences with Muriel. Like Andy and I use samples and stuff, but we had Linda go into a studio in Atlanta and just record a whole bunch of tuning up and playing different stuff. It was just so cool because she was good, but Muriel wasn't supposed to be that great. So Linda did this lovely stuff and it just worked. It was crazy. It was so much fun. We got to use these sitar pieces for Linda. It's great.
Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week I sit down with the composer for Courage the Cowardly Dog, Jody Gray. We chat about how Jody came to work on Courage with his composing partner, Andy Ezrin, creating the music and sound effects for Courage the Cowardly Dog, reminiscing about the late great Thea White, and so much more. This one was a lot of fun, and getting to hear the behind-the-scenes antics of one of my favorite shows as a kid was absolutely priceless. I hope you enjoy the episode, and happy Halloween. Cowardly Dog, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Julian?
Man, I've been looking for great. Great is an understatement, man, because I've really been looking forward to this one because there's things from my childhood. Excuse me as I get a little choked up. There's things from my childhood that I pull back. And, I've said it so many times on this podcast, the fans are tired of hearing it, but there's nothing like a voice that you hear from your favorite voice actor, a sound you hear from your favorite band, a smell, a taste from your favorite food that can transport you back to your childhood. I can tell you where I was at the first time. Obviously I was at home because I was a little kid, but I could tell you what it was like watching Courage the Cowardly Dog, that pilot, for the first time, hearing the sounds that were coming out, hearing the music, hearing and seeing all these it was overload in the best possible way when it came to visual stimuli, man. So obviously, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, Jody here did the music score, fucking sound effects, everything for Courage the Cowardly Dog. And I really got to know, man, how did you and Dilly get connected, or were you guys friends prior to Courage? Or
my co-writer on the project, partner Andy Ezrin, knew this guy Rob Marcus, who was John's original producer. John used to do, before Courage was greenlit, he did a lot of stuff, a lot of little indie things, and some really, really cool things. John, he was talking to John, and John said, I know these guys that are, this guy, Andy Ezrin, who's really, really good. And Andy said, I don't know shit about scoring. I'm going to call Jody. So we both got together and we did this Noodles and Ned piece for John, which is kind of very Tom and Jerry, no spoken stuff, just wall to wall music. And we had a lot of fun doing it. And then a little while passed and we got a call to come in and demo up some stuff for this new TV show, Courage the Cowardly Dog. And that's totally exactly how it happened. We beat out a whole bunch of people, which we were very amazed with. But one of the things I think that gave us like a shot was that we had worked with John already. And John is like very specific and particular and very non-specific. By that, I mean, he wants you to go to the ends of the earth to come up with something that's really cool and really unique. You know, like for instance, in this Noodles and Ned thing, there was an airplane, right? So one of the main focal points of that particular thing was Dilly, Ned, the character Ned, who's obviously John Dilworth, was riding this plane. And so we did this kind of ass backwards version of, you know, like a kind of a Star Wars thing or a Superman thing, kind of John Williams. And John said, no, 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 no. You got to do that with different instruments. I like that music. So we kind of switched out horns for some goofy synth, and we just switched everything around, and it became this utterly impossibly crazy version of John Williams' flying theme. It didn't sound like John Williams, but it was obviously you know, inspired by that. So we did a bunch of stuff like that within that show. And when it came time to do something for Courage, the first thing that we were shown was a little piece of film, the beginning of Cat's Motel, when they go into the motel and Cat's rises up and there's that crazy sound, you know? And so we just said, what's the craziest, coolest, wackiest shit that we can do? Pay no attention, you know, to the history of cartoon. Just do something completely wild. And John was constantly, you know, wanting us to do cinematic stuff and stuff that was different. And so we won hands down. We beat out a lot of really serious guys at the time. And it continued like that. John and I became really good friends. And I've done tons of other stuff with him, as Andy has as well. You know, it was just, that was the leg up. It was like, we tried to match those images, those voices, like everything that was cool and unique about Courage. We had to fit the music under, over, inside of that. And that's how it came about.
It's a very cool story, man. And there's two shows that I can really call back to as a kid, that the show isn't what it is without the music, and the music isn't what it is without the show. I'm pretty sure I butchered the shit out of that, but
no, that's good. I got it.
Yeah, right. So you need both. And the one obviously is you guys, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and the other one was running on Nickelodeon. It's my favorite Nickelodeon show of all time, and it was the composer for Jim Lang and Craig Bartlett with a little show called Hey Arnold, right?
Yeah.
There's, like I said, those you guys' two shows, that and Hey Arnold. I mean, when I think of Courage and I think of Arnold, I think of the music just as much as I think of the characters, right? So if you take and subtract one of those from the other, just for me, I don't think it would flow as well. And what I loved about you guys's concept with all the music, and I'm very dumb when it comes to music, so if I say the wrong words, I apologize ahead of time.
It's all good, David. You're saying exactly what we thought, by the way.
Yeah. So
how we approached it.
What's so crazy about it is, like, you see this and you look at these characters, and David said something that I thought was so profound, because when I asked him, like, what do you think about when you think about Courage, he's like, I dream in these colors, I dream in the Courage palette, right? So I don't know if it's the same for you when it comes to music. You dream in Courage's music, but like, I hear Courage before I even hear Courage talk, man. I'm hearing the fucking the weird little guitar riffs, or the weird little this, the that, and it's like, man, this fits so perfectly. Like, everything, nothing was out of place. Everything seemed like it had a point. There was nothing strained, there was nothing pushed, there was nothing forced. It felt like it was second nature. It felt like this is what it was always supposed to be. Obviously, with you and Andy doing this stuff, I mean, did it feel like that for you guys? Was it like, did you have to pull this stuff out, or did it kind of come natural with this show for you?
I would think that it would be both. You know, some of the stuff we really had to, I wouldn't say struggle, but we really had to do like 4 or 5 times until we got it right. We knew when we got it right, but you know, like, here's the deal. We had 5 days to score that whole thing and mix it, and it was crazy.
That's insane.
And yeah, it was really nuts. So really, we had 3 days, because the last 2 days were mixing the music, right? So when it came to a character, it was like, what is this character? And Andy and I would kind of jam around a little bit.
Mhm.
We would both sit in the room, and I'd pick up a guitar, he'd sit at a keyboard, or vice versa, whatever we were doing, and try to come up with something that was really iconic for that character. Like it was melodic, but yet at the same time it was really dark and kind of crazy, but it was always distinctive. We tried to make it like really distinctive, like that's what that character does. And for me, in all my scoring life and subsequent scoring, film and TV, it's always been like the old classic thing of leitmotif, where the character has a motif, a musical motif, and you hear that. It was like when I grew up, I listened to shit like Peter and the Wolf and stuff, and there would be like, each instrument would be a character. And so we kind of like did the same kind of thing with Courage. And some of the stuff was really crazy, and some of the stuff was just really beautiful and melodic and just gorgeous. And I get emails constantly from people saying, how did you do this? What's this? I love this. And it was really just Andy and I sitting in a room trying to get through it. Sometimes it was like walking through cotton candy or something, trying to get to the other side of the room, like, but some of that stuff also was very inspired by John, in the sense that he would come in, similarly to the story I just told you about the John Williams thing, where he'd say, you can make that wackier, you can make that darker and more fucked up. You could, and so one piece in particular where John drove me crazy, Andy had gone off on the road, and so I'm sitting in the room all by myself. And when we were doing the Tower of Dr. Jalost, which is a lot of fans' favorite episodes, and so John and my wife and John and his girlfriend all went to see this Carl Orff piece called Carmina Burana. I don't know if you know it, but it's it's actually Hitler's favorite piece of music, is what it is. Seriously. Yeah. Not to interject any politics, I'm not, but it was kind of like John stood over me, and I'm writing this thing and he's punching me in the shoulder going, more timpanis, more horns, and he's going crazy. And I'm sitting there, trying to do it. And it was kind of like through intimidation, we got through this score. And obviously I spent a lot of time alone refining it and stuff, but he would come in and he would be a catalyst for stuff. He'd say, go here, go there. Or sometimes he'd just say, that's perfect. Let's have dinner. That would be like it, right?
Who's picking up that check?
Yeah, he would never pick it up. God damn it. That bastard. But anyway, so it had a lot to do with the intersection between John and Andy and I. And the other thing that's kind of interesting, what you said about David talking about, dreaming in colors. There was a very specific color palette to Courage, which was John's sensibility and also his girlfriend's sensibility. She did a lot of that stuff too. And John always said, I never worry about the music and I never worry about the color. Yeah. It's always going to be just what I want. Of course, I would be bleeding by the time that 5-day week was over, and Andy'd be on the floor lying in his own vomit. But we would get it done, man. We would get it done.
Do you like Nickelodeon?
Do you like whiskey or whiskey cocktails?
Then you should hang out with us. I'm Ty.
I'm Sean.
And we run Whiskey Loadian, the podcast.
Ty, what is this podcast about?
It's where we drink whiskey or whiskey cocktails while rewatching the old school Nickelodeon shows we loved growing up.
And let's be honest, we go on a lot of tangents.
So many tangents. Are we on a tangent right now?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh my gosh, well, we gotta get back. We are covering Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Are You Afraid of the Dark, all the golden greats of Nickelodeon.
And these shows give us so much joy.
And we want to bring you that same joy. So find us wherever you get your podcast at Whiskey Loadian.
And I gotta cut you off right now because we honestly cannot afford any more ad space, and it really just kind of has to end right.
There's fans out here that listen to this that are animators. Somebody please animate Jody's hands bleeding and Andy laying in a pile of vomit, crying.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. John and Andy used to do this thing where John would run in and jump on Andy, and they would fight like long lost brothers, beating the crap out of each other. And then I'd have to go in there and separate them. And come on, we got work to do. Because otherwise they'd be rolling around on the carpet for hours. Anyway.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Great work environment is what it sounded like.
It was fun. It was totally fun.
Oh, that's what it sounds like, man. And you can tell. I mean, I don't want to sound pretentious and say like you can tell whenever you watch something that the people are having fun, because there's been plenty of movies or television shows that I've had folks on from, and I was like, man, it seemed like you guys were having a lot of fun, and then they're like this, while we're recording, and they're like, look, man, I gotta tell you, the place absolutely fucking sucked, man. The people were horrible. I was like, really? I couldn't tell. He's like, yeah, I wanted to hang myself on a regular basis. He was like, I hated going to work, or she was like, I hated going to work. I was like, well, fuck, man. Well, I feel like I'm a douchebag now because I said I could see it in the art, because you can tell when somebody's happy at work. You can tell when somebody's, enjoying something. But like I said, man, just with something like Courage, it just seemed like it was so wacky. It was so out there. It was so fun. Like I said, the music. Keeping it on Andy for just a second, man, because I always find it interesting when there's two people. Obviously, animation is super collaborative, right? So you guys are bouncing things off of each other. But in your opinion, with you and Andy, does it help, or was Courage the only thing you guys have worked together on? Or
no,
okay.
No, we've done tons of stuff together.
Okay, so when we
just finished Scooby-Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog last year. We did that.
Yeah, there's quite a few questions about that one.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, so when you have a collaborative partner like you and Andy, do you find like it helps you more to have somebody that has the same like sensibility when it comes to music, or does it work better if you guys are like opposites, like he likes rock, you like hip hop, or you like hip hop, he likes country?
That's a really great question. I mean, both Andy and I are classically trained musicians. Mm-hmm. So that part of it is kind of like we're kind of on an equal basis as far as, hey, play that C above what, whatever. But Andy is a jazz freak. He's a jazz player. He's played with everybody. He's out on the road right now with Madeline Peru. He does, tons of gigs, and he's great. He called me one day from Sardinia and said, hey man, guess what? I'm in Sardinia. I'm playing with Sting. I'm like, oh, okay. And, so we're different enough, but both of us have a real serious comic sensibility. So like there was a lot of fun. Like sometimes Andy, who I would say is not more of a serious musician than I am, but he would a couple of times, and I would probably do the same thing on the other side. He'd probably say the same thing, where he would go, oh man, that's not musical enough. And I would say, it doesn't matter. This is just wacky. Let's just do this, and other times, see, we had this room, I had this studio, and within that studio, we had all kinds of crazy stuff. Like we bought a lot of these little toys, Casio keyboards, all kinds of percussion instruments. Andy bought like a harmonium, which is an ancient 19th century instrument, kind of like an organ that he brought back from Paris. And we would try different shit. One time, which was really fun. So in this episode, there were two episodes, Beaver Tail and Conway the Contaminationist, where there was like really dark sonic stuff. And in the Beaver's Tail, there was like this water that flooded nowhere. And so we went into a studio, and where there was a huge piano. And the guy really ended up getting really pissed at us because we put like little metal things, you know, inside the piano, which is kind of like what John Cage, the composer, would do. And we would do stuff like Andy would put his feet down on the pedals, and then I would hit the strings like this. And it sounded like so unearthly and wacky, you know, and we used this in a lot of different contexts. We created so many unique kind of tableaus and bits and pieces of music that we would edit and fit together and do different things with it. You know, like David Lynch, the director, has this guy, Angelo Badalamento, who's his composer. And Angelo would do this beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous music. And then he'd give it to David Lynch, and he called the music firewood because David Lynch would fuck it all up. He'd do whatever he wanted to, you know, and then it would be inserted in the movie. And we kind of did the same thing to each, what are we going to do here? Let's do this. We, of course, used samples, we used electronic stuff, but the most fun stuff was when we played live instruments in the room. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we played instruments that we didn't know how to play. Like I played flute on a lot of stuff in Courage. I don't know how to play flute. So I go, it was like, what the hell is that sound? I don't know. So it was experimental and fun. And, you know, Andy and I would laugh and laugh. John would come in and he would say, that sucks, or something. He would never say that, but he would force us to do something else. You know, it was a constant thing. It was like a big sandbox, you know, and we just went crazy. And we were really lucky in that, speaking of Linda Semensky was a big advocate of John. Mm-hmm. And she got John the gig, I guess. I don't know how it all worked out. But at the end of the day, you know, one of the things that John did, which was really cool, was he wanted to pay tribute to Linda for helping him out. So he had Muriel play sitar, which Linda Semensky played.
Really?
So that is Linda Semensky in most of those sequences with Muriel. Like Andy and I use samples and stuff, but we had Linda go into a studio in Atlanta and just record a whole bunch of tuning up and playing different stuff. It was just so cool because she was good, but you know, Muriel wasn't supposed to be that great. So Linda did this lovely stuff and it just worked. It was crazy. It was so much fun. We got to use these sitar pieces for Linda. It's great.
That's so awesome. And, you know, I'm so glad that her name comes up. I've had the pleasure of actually, that plushy plank is actually from Linda, the plank, man. So it was really cool because she sent me a gift and she's like, I was cleaning out my garage and she's like, I found this, thought you might like it. And then as soon as I just peeked into the box, I knew exactly what it was. I'm like, oh shit, I know what this is. And the coolest thing that she had sent wasn't the plushy plank. It was the fucking little card she sent me, a little thank you card. You know, it had Ed, and Eddie on it. And then she sent me 2 of her business cards from the Atlanta days when she was over there for Cartoon Network when it was still in the Turner Tower. And I was like, dude, this is like, I sent her a picture. I was like, first off, you didn't have to do this. I'm so appreciative that you did this. But second off, these business cards are so cool. And she's like, I thought you might like those. And I was like, it really is, because it's like a time capsule. It's like, you know, people don't do business cards anymore. I mean, I still have them because I go out and, I mean, obviously I'm wearing my Orlando Magic t-shirt. So I'm always wearing the same hat that's fucking broken. You know, I've had the same hat. It's my favorite hat. I've had it for like 4 years. People have had to sew it together and put it back and stitch it. I mean, it really looks like Frankenstein underneath here. You know, so fuck man, I can't remember where I was going with this. T-shirts. Linda. Yeah, Linda and t-shirts. So, you know, I always have a cartoon t-shirt on somewhere out there, right? So all the time people come up to me and they're like, oh man, I love that t-shirt, or I love that show. And they would talk to me about the show. And I was like, oh fuck man, I'm supposed to be networking here. Here, take this card, because if you like this shit, I was like, I talked to these people and these people are so cool because this was their job, this was their life. And they did all of this stuff, not only for a paycheck, but a lot of these folks did this because it was something they absolutely loved to do. And they brought us joy. So I was like, if you liked this show, listen to this person's story on my podcast. And I've this is why I'm bringing up fucking business cards and shit. But so it's like a dying medium, but it's still relevant. I mean, I don't even know how many people actually look.
A lot of people still use them. They, but they end up being digitized, whatever. But I still have some business cards. I very rarely use them, but every once in a while I do. But it's talking about that time. That was the golden classic time of Cartoon Network. I mean, all of those shows were just, and also outside of Cartoon Network, you had Ren and Stimpy, you had all this stuff going on at the same time.
Yep.
SpongeBob and all. It was really a golden age. And it's really kind of, and Linda J. Bastian, everybody at Cartoon Network were such advocates of John's. We got to do kind of whatever we wanted to do. I know that there were a couple of scripts that, got the thumbs down or whatever, and a couple of things here and there, but in what did we do? 104 episodes, I believe. We had one note from the network to change one musical cue. That was it.
Man, talk about a time to be alive. Like, you're not the first person that said that. And I've had so many people on that have had direct contact with Linda, and they all say the same thing: how great she is, how phenomenal I've said it multiple times on this podcast as well. If there were more people like her still at Cartoon Network, still at HBO and all these other things, we wouldn't have the access for animation that we're having right now. And the fact that we're still at, I brought it up so many times, so I apologize, but the fact that we're still having actors and actresses go on there that have not been relevant in any part of the last decade can go on to one of the biggest shows of the year for Hollywood, for animation, the Emmys, the Oscars, and all this other shit, and sit there and say how great this stuff is for kids, right? These actors and actresses, like I said, have not been fucking relevant in close to a decade, yet they can get on here and spout some bullshit below the belt thing about cartoons and animation. But the whole reason I bring that up is because if we had more folks like Linda at Cartoon Network, at Nickelodeon, at Disney, people that would trust in the creators. I've never hired somebody and then stood over their shoulder the entire time, because I feel like there is an agreement. If I come to you, you're obviously very, very good at what you do, because I wouldn't go to somebody that sucks, right? So if I'm going to pay you all of this money, I'm going to give you enough freedom to do whatever it is you have to do. If I have to reel you back in, that's something that might happen down the road, but I'm not going to sit over there and like, listen, Jody, you really should have hit that, I don't know, A key instead of the B key. I don't even know if there's a B key, Jody, if we're being honest.
There is.
Okay. Cool, man. So I'm winning already. We'll just have to edit that little post out right there. We'll fix that shit in post, as they say.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, the thing, think about it. John was autonomous. They gave him a studio. I mean, he went out and hired 25 or 30 people, and they did everything in New York.
Yeah.
They didn't move to LA or move to Atlanta. It was all done in New York. There were people that came by, and, a lot of back and forth. And there was a producer who oversaw the whole thing, Winnie Chafee, who's really, really good. But at the end of the day, we were pretty autonomous.
Yeah.
Short of John saying do this or do that. I mean, he was the executive producer, so he was in charge. But his encouragement was drive off a cliff. Go. I encourage you. Yeah. Pedal to the metal, drive off that cliff, and we did it.
That's what's, like I said, there's so many things that are echoed through all of my guests. It's the same thing, that you'll never see another animation boom like it was in the 90s to the early 2000s, because there was so much freedom. For a society that preaches diversity, if you go and look at all three channels, three of the big channels, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Disney, there's diversity in a sense of a cast of characters. But when you look at all of the shows, every single show looks exactly the same. Same animation style, same jokes, same this, same that. But when you go back and you look at the 90s for Cartoon Network, Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Johnny Bravo, I am Baboon, you've got Billy and Mandy, you've got Codename Kids Next Door. Not one of those shows looked like another one of those shows. You know what I mean? True. There was true diversity back in the 90s, but everybody has this cookie cutter.
Can I ask you, can we take 1 second break
Yeah.
The beeper just went off over here, and I think it's my, okay. So please continue.
Yeah, you know, so it's just when it comes to the shows of today, everything is cookie cutter. Everything is the same. You know, it's I don't know what it is, but it's just maybe it's just that like when you become an old guy, and I'm not even that old. I just turned 33 a couple weeks ago. But when you come older and you come set in your ways, you're like, my generation had the greatest X, Y, and Z. Your generation sucks. But there's a lot of stuff that I like from this newer generation of cartoons. It just seemed like for every one, you know, hit show now, you've got 15 that are missing. And it seemed like back in the day, it was just everything was a hit that was going on Cartoon Network, you know? So it was a great time to be alive because of, like I said, folks like you, folks like Linda, folks like John. And then hearing the same thing you guys said, you guys had freedom. You didn't have that overbearing, like knowing what I know now about animation and just the movie business, television business, the Hollywood business, if you will. In hearing the stories that I've heard, it's insane to think that they entrusted so many people. Just, did you ever watch Ed, Ed and Eddie?
Sure.
Okay, so that entire crew I've had on from AKA Studios, the guys and gals that drew it up there in Vancouver, up in Canada, show created by Danny Antonucci, right? So I've had almost every single board artist and every single writer on from that series, and I've had to cut so many stories because they're like, hey man, the climate we're in right now, that's kind of frowned upon, stories like that. So can you cut that shit out? I was like, no problem, man. Absolutely, we can cut it out. But hearing what they would do on a day-to-day basis, like they would come up with stories in strip clubs. They would come up with, I think the Christmas special was birthed out of a strip club meeting. You know, every Friday they would all go to the strip club. If it was your birthday, everybody was buying you a lap dance. And he was like, you know, we did things our way. And they would send Linda up, or they would send an executive up. And Danny would be like, fuck off, man. This is my show. We're doing it my way. And sometimes he would come out of his own pocket to pay for any kind of setbacks, you know, but just to know that they gave you guys so much freedom and they developed and had such hit shows, you figure if it's not broke, don't fix it. Keep doing that. But it just seems like they're starting to tighten their grips because they think the first thing that should go is animation because it's for kids. That was a long-winded way of saying, you know, this shit isn't just for kids, man. There's some real good stuff that this
Absolutely
put out, you know.
What I would suggest is it's either, I think it's on the Disney Channel or it's on Paramount Plus. There's a film called The Offer, Offer. So I don't have to say anything that you have to cut. The Offer is the story of Al Ruddy and how The Godfather was made.
My favorite.
And this is one of the great, you know, mini series of the year.
Is that the one that just released where they're doing, it's like 5, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 episodes, but it's episodic.
It's episodic. It's like 8 episodes in all. Okay, and it's on Paramount Plus. It's phenomenal. Oh, that's all I have to say. But it is really, despite the fact that some of it is a little exaggerated, it's really truly the story of, you know, the anguish that you have to go through dealing with executives, dealing with, you know, because look, at the end of the day, people's jobs are on the line. It's the same thing as a record business. You know, I used to do a lot of, you know, records at one time and stuff. And, you know, everybody, oh, this is so cool. No, it's not free. You know, there's a lot of like stuff. People are paying money, you know, and they want it their way, whether it's wrong or not, you know, so it's difficult. But there was an extraordinary hierarchy of folks at Cartoon Network, you know, and all, you know, Nick, everything at that time, there was a great deal of freedom. And it's got to do with money now. It's got to do with political correctness. You would be surprised what we can no longer say. Yeah. You know, it's quite extraordinary. And if we talk off camera, I'll tell you, now all the kids are going to go nuts and say, wait, what did he say? Okay.
Yeah, man, it's one of those that's to be continued, or it's we leave them wanting more or whatever.
Yes. There you go.
You know,
I'll come back with a mask on.
Yeah. Use your imagination, folks.
Yes.
something funny about The Godfather. I don't think The Godfather's ever come up on this podcast, at least not for me. I always wanted to be in the mafia when I was younger. And here's why. Before we think, oh, this guy is a psychopath or a sociopath. No. My idea of what the mob was in one of my grandfather's favorite movies of all time, Goodfellas. I probably shouldn't have seen Goodfellas like the age of 7, 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. But I only saw that opening sequence, right? Ray Liotta, rest in peace, Ray Liotta. Gone way
Always
too.
wanted to be a gangster.
That opening sequence, man, from the earliest time I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And it was going through the entire thing on why it was great being a gangster. And you saw great food. I was like, they played games after dark and nobody told them what to do. They got to drive their own cars. They got to dress nice. I was like, dude, I want to do that. So for the longest time, I wanted to be in the mafia. I was like, because they get to do whatever it is they want to do. I love spaghetti. I love lasagna. I love all of this food, right? So flash forward, a couple years, and I'm not doing too great in elementary school, middle school, somewhere around there. And John Gotti's book, I believe it was called Teflon Don, his autobiography. I think that's what it was called, was Teflon Don. It came out, and I was like, oh shit, I want to know more about the mafia, right? So I hadn't seen Godfather yet. I was like, I know I wanted to buy this book because I wanted to know more about this guy. I kept seeing him in the news and shit. So my mom takes us all to Books A Million, and I think that store's closed down too. So rest in peace, Books A Million. But she was like, all right, you can go get a new book. And she's like, oh my God, my oldest son wants to read. So I knew it was definitely not for me, because when I asked for help to find the book, the lady was like, well, where's your mother? I was like, oh, she's over there. She told me to get this book. It's for her. Right. So my brother and my younger brother and my younger sister have already got books. So I slide the book underneath their books so my mom couldn't see it. So, she's talking to the clerk, they're checking everything out, and then they go, and then we get into my mom's truck, and my mom had this, it was a weird F-150 type of truck, but it was the first one where they started having that back window that could come down, and the back of the glass, in the middle of the glass. I think it was like a sports track is what it was called.
Yeah.
But so I'm sitting back there, and I remember going, my mom's talking or whatever, and I'm reading the book. And I go, hey, Mom, what's a Colombian necktie? And she was like, what the fuck? And she was like, what do you want to know about a Colombian necktie? I was like, well, it's in this book. I want to know what a Colombian necktie. I don't know what that is. Ladies and gentlemen, this is before Google. This is before Narcos came out on Netflix.
Sure.
This is before all of YouTube and shit like that you guys are so lucky and be blessed with right now. So she was like, what the fuck are you reading? And I was like, well, the book you just got me. And she like, let me see the book. So I showed her. She's like, why the fuck did you buy this book? I'm like, well, you bought it. You told me I could have a book. You told me I could get any book I wanted. And she's like, well, yeah, but you're kind of pushing it there with getting this stuff. You're way too young for this. And I was like, all right, well, what's a Colombian necktie? And she's like, you're too young. So I never got the book back. I don't think I've ever finished the book. Probably should go and buy it so I can read it. I'm probably pretty sure it was horrible. Don't come after me, Gambino crime family, please. But anyways, the only reason I tell you that story is because I want to be in the mafia when I was younger, right? So flash forward, I've seen the Goodfellas. I've seen Godfather now, and the Godfather was completely blown away. 13 years old, I have never in my life seen a movie like that up until that point, where it was a masterpiece. There was nothing off, and even at a young age I knew how perfect this movie was, right? So I'm watching this movie and I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, man, I should learn Italian so I don't have to read the subtitles. I took 4 years, Jody, of Italian in high school. I could understand it a little bit. I didn't have to read the subtitles. I can kind of get the context. And I got a chance to go to Italy when I was almost 18, because you did 4 years in a foreign language. You could go on the foreign language trip. So I got to go over in Italy, experience this shit. Found out the first day you do not talk about the mafia over there. You don't ask questions. You don't do any of that. I didn't think it was that serious, but shit, it was serious. But yeah, so that was my long-winded way of saying, man, The Godfather. Fuck, what a great movie, man. Perfect movie.
It is perfect, and which is why I think now, after hearing you talk about this, you really need to see The Offer, because truth is stranger than fiction. That's all I got to say.
Well, it's funny because I remember seeing this trailer. I'm like, fuck, I got to remember this. And it's so crazy, like your turnaround in your memory for stuff that's coming out right now, from TV shows to music. The turnaround, the news cycle, whatever you want to call it, is just go.
Absolutely.
It's hard to keep up. So I'm glad you brought it up. I've got it written down here, underlined twice and circled a couple times. But getting it back to courage, man. we won't go too much deeper into courage because there's a lot of great fans questions that articulate this topic a hell of a lot better than I can. But what I do want to ask you before we get to some of these fans questions was, when you think of Cartoon Network, and we just started doing this because on October 1st, we're going to release our Betty Cohen episode. So that episode, at the end of it, is going to be bookended by all of these people that I had send in audio clips. So I was like, what does Cartoon Network mean to you? Send me a 30-second audio clip. And I was blown away by the response that I got. I've gotten people from 4 or 5 different countries now speaking in their native country. And I'm hoping what they're saying is above board and they're not trying to,
Gotcha.
gather some folks, but getting to hear like what Cartoon Network meant to everybody was so damn cool. But what I'd love to know, man, what does Cartoon Network mean to you, and what is Courage the Cowardly Dog specifically? That one more importantly than Cartoon Network. But what is Courage?
Well, both of them are just extraordinarily creative periods. And Cartoon Network was, I didn't really deal directly with them. I dealt with John and everyone in Stretch Films, although I did deal with some folks at Cartoon Network. But it was always amazed me, and I wish I could go back because I would do things differently, because that was the first major television series that I was involved in, and I thought that was the way it was. I didn't know until later that that's not the way it was. This is a very, very unique experience, and I loved working on Courage. I became, close friends with a lot of people involved, who I'm obviously still friends with. And, I remember like a lot of conversations with John talking about, wouldn't you like a dog like this? This is like the best dog in the world. Look at what he's doing now. John would like look at it like he had nothing to do with it. And we'd sit there, stuff like the episode at the North Pole where Courage sews up the hole in the ozone layer. And it's kind of like, John was like, isn't that great? And John can be very histrionic. He's very like, oh, that's so great. He would go over the top. And it was an incredibly creative period. I did several other, Cartoon Network things at the time. One-off episodes, a few, some pilots and stuff. But Courage was very unique because it certainly wasn't a kid's show, like a normal, what they thought of it. And it was really there were a lot of other cartoon shows that had adult stuff in them, not like Courage, though. Courage dealt with issues in amusing ways, and I remember very much John reading a lot of stuff like books on, I remember one of the last episodes in the series, I guess it's the penultimate one, Perfect, where John had this book about perfection. And he was, making all kinds of notes in this that the script would eventually come out of. And he was always trying to base stuff on something real. Some of the stuff was just silly and goofy and funny, but he really thought about characters. He really thought about the relationship. I said, hey John, how come you can't see Muriel and Eustace's eyes behind the glasses? He says, because they're spiritually blind.
That's so fucking deep, man.
And and it's true. They never really knew what Courage was doing for them. Even Muriel, when he was saving her, she wasn't like all ebullient. Oh, thank you. She was just like, Courage saved her. And Eustace was just such a freaking asshole. It was like, who cared? But it was just really, so John would every once in a while give me like these little keys to the kingdom. Like, this is what's going on here. And sometimes he would explain sequences, like one of the, and I don't know if one of the people that put questions in is going to talk about this, but in the very famous sequel in Human Habitrail, where the gerbil is chasing Courage down the river, and there's a choir. I don't know if anybody's said anything about that, but it was kind of like we talked about, this is so cool. What can we do here that's really unique? And this was one of the times when Andy wasn't around. And so we kind of thought, wouldn't it be cool to suck out all of the sound design, except for the voices, and write a choir to it?
Mhm.
So there's this choir, and there's no sound of water. There's Courage going, help, and this beautiful choir playing. And it's like, what is that? You know, and it was so effective. And I've had like hundreds of people write to me about this. How did you come up with that? I don't know. John and I just sat in a room and thought, what can we do that's different?
Mhm.
And that was, you know, it's just, it was so cool. Anyway.
I got to imagine, man. And you brought her up. You know, we recently lost Thea White.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, man. And I love being able to do this portion of the show when somebody's no longer here. You know, we did it with James Avery, obviously Uncle Phil, and he played the original Shredder in the 1987 TMNT show, the first cartoon for the Ninja Turtles. You know, we've done it with Tuck Tucker, a board artist for Nickelodeon. And I believe David, I think she had already passed by the time David had came on.
I believe so.
Yeah, so I believe you know, he gave us, yes, it was because he told us she was like, your husband was a Beatle, I think is what he said. You know, so but when you hear the name Thea White, man, do you have a story or an interaction you had with her that comes to mind?
I have a couple of stories actually. Thea and Andy White, who was the Beatle, who's the guy playing on Love Me Do,
Yeah.
because George Martin didn't trust Ringo to play on it because Pete Best sucked. And Andy was a big deal. He played on Tom Jones, It's Not Unusual, a whole bunch of these 60s hits. And so Andy and Thea came by our studio several times and sat in the back. Andy wanted to watch, you know, modern recording techniques. And so they would sit there, and Andy, in his very thick Scottish accent, would ask questions. And we were, you know, happy to have them there. And Thea was extremely funny,
Yeah.
very smart, not Scottish, you know, came from New Jersey or something, and sounded like she came from New Jersey. And so I met Theo several times in the studio, a couple of times when she was doing voiceovers, because I would be in there doing some other stuff. And the last time I saw her was after Andy had passed away, and it was at the 25th anniversary of Courage, or 20th anniversary, whatever it was. There was a Cartoon Network gave us a big party, and I spent a lot of time with Thea. And in fact, I snapped some photos and sent them to John, and John used it in a eulogy for her. You know,
Yeah,
it was, yeah, that, you know, I wish it wasn't on my crappy phone, but that's all I had. So she was just really human and funny. And out of maybe everybody, I think that her humanity and her humor leaked through in her voice performances. And I always smiled because of interactions that I'd had with her. And, you know, she was just, I don't think she's replaceable as far as the Muriel character, you know? I mean, there's a guy called Jeff Berger, who was Eustace in the Scooby-Doo Courage thing, and he's really good.
Yeah.
You know, but there was something about her Muriel that was so natural. And so, you know, it was like, this woman is not Scott. You know, it's kind of like she was like the Meryl Streep of Muriel's or something. You know, she could she could do this accent flawlessly, and she could put, all I could say is put so much humanity into that character. It was great. And I remember kissing her goodbye at the party And I guess 2 years later she passed. That was the last time I saw her. But Marty, apparently, because they're both night birds, Marty spoke to her on the phone like almost every night.
Yeah.
You know, they had after they got like reacquainted when they were doing the Scooby-Doo thing.
Yeah, well, that's something sweet. Thank you for sharing those stories. And I know those stories are tough for you guys to share, but I feel like if there's anything we can do for somebody that was such a huge part in so many of our childhood, or so many of our lives, and your life as well, we immortalize them. Obviously that character, that voice, she'll never go, unforgotten. But, I feel like it's something that I really enjoy doing that, because I think it's something special that you guys shared. And now that we get to share that as well as fans. I don't know if I asked David this, but was that why she picked the Scottish accent? It's because of Andy?
Okay, no. There is a character called Muriel who's a friend of John's, who's Scottish and lives in Scotland.
Okay.
And John based the character on his friend Muriel in Scotland.
Oh man.
I don't know if she's still alive. She was an older woman.
Yeah.
But I've seen pictures of her. She doesn't look anything like, the rendering of Muriel. But I think that was the reason why. I'm almost 100% sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure that that is out there as far as the origins of that character. But I don't know why I didn't think to ask. And when you like, thick Scottish accent, I was like, I wonder if that was a nod to her husband. But anyways. Before we rotate into fans' questions, there's a couple questions that I like to ask because fans get you for so long. I figure I can get you a couple more questions.
Sure, whatever you need.
But
I'm enjoying it. It's all good.
Thank you, man. I've like I said, I've been looking forward to this one for quite some time, and I'm glad you're on here. But your Mount Rushmore, I actually forgot to give you this when we were doing a little pre-interview. I usually give these two questions to folks because it's tripped up quite a few people. However, the one I always ask is your Mount Rushmore, right? This one's fun. So your Mount Rushmore of influences. So you get 4 people that have influenced you in your career. Since you're on the musical side, I would love to hear some 4 composers. That way I can write down 4 new people. But you get 4 plus 1 as an honorable mention. So you got to pick 5 people. So Jody, who is on your Mount Rushmore of inspiration? Number
1, way up in the stratosphere, is Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah.
He wrote, his first movie was Citizen Kane, and his last movie was Taxi Driver, and everything in between was all the Hitchcock films. He was incredible. He invented a musical cinematic language like nobody else. I would also say I'm very, very enamored as far as animation work is concerned. Carl Stalling's work was extraordinary, all the Warner Brothers stuff. And I would also say that Slash, Scott Bradley, who did all the Tom and Jerry stuff, all those instruments, they're kind of on the same level. They're both absolutely brilliant. I would also say a lot of people don't mention him, but his career is so long and storied, and he's so brilliant. Still writing scores, John Williams,
yes,
is pretty amazing. I don't know if anybody knows how great, maybe they will 50 years after. I know a lot of people worship his work, but when you think of something like Star Wars, and then you listen to his score for Catch Me If You Can, they're like from another planet. They're not even the same folks. He's really, really great. And I would also say, as one of the inventors of modern cinema way back then, was Franz Waxman, who wrote the score to The Bride of Frankenstein, which incredibly affected me.
Yeah,
it's just incredible. And I would say last but not least, because he's not a composer, is the work of Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
His work is crazy. In fact, my entire sort of thesis for film scoring, especially in things like Courage, I don't always get a chance to do that, but in A Clockwork Orange, there's a very famous scene where these hoodlums, I don't know if you've ever seen that film, but where these hoodlums are raping this woman and smashing her artwork, and they're singing in the rain while they're doing this. And it's the strangest juxtaposition of, this, one of the most famous musicals of all time from, the first half of the century, of the 20th century, and this incredible violence that's going on.
Yeah.
And I did that a lot in Courage. Whenever I could, I would kind of score against what's going on screen. If something was really dark and fucked up, sometimes I'd do something like really silly. Andy and I would do something really silly. And as far as contemporary folks are concerned, I really like the work of Alexander Desplat, who's, I don't even know how he sleeps, because he does like 20 scores a year or something. It's like crazy. He did like The Shape of Water and Godzilla, and it's just nuts.
Yeah.
I also have a feeling, and hopefully he won't shoot me, that that fantastic Fox thing with George Clooney playing the fox. There's a score that he did that sounds just like Courage. And if I get him alone in a room with like a pistol or something, I'm going to say, dude, did you copy our sensibility in that movie? The Mr. Fox, fantastic. I don't remember the name of them. But anyway, those are the ones that I really like. But Bernard Herrmann changed my life.
Yeah.
I mean, just Psycho, he would be, remembered. It's just amazing composer.
Yeah, man, what a way to start your career and what a way to end your career with those.
Yeah, Citizen Kane, Taxi Driver.
That's
all of the Ray Harryhausen movies in between, all of those, the great Hitchcock movies. It's just crazy what he
really
did.
is, man.
Twilight Zones, it was his.
Dude,
he did tons of Twilight Zone stuff.
I love that show so much. So when we were younger, my my Aunt Marion, my great Aunt Marion, and my great Uncle Bob, rest in peace, Uncle Bob, they would come down during the summer and they would watch us, right? My mom was generally working 2 jobs. So during the summer, they would come down and watch us, and we're 5th grade, and they were from West Virginia, right? So it was a little bit cooler during the winter or the summertime, up there than it is down here in Florida. They would come down and they would not want to go outside during the day. It was just so hot, right? And they're already really old folks anyways. They really shouldn't have been watching us, but they couldn't have been like some of the sweetest people I've ever gotten the chance to be with. But all they would do is they would watch the same shows every single day. In the heat of the night, they would watch Walker, Texas Ranger, Murder, She Wrote, anything on TV Land, the A-Team.
Right.
So we would watch these movies these TV shows every single day with my great Aunt Marion and my great Uncle Bob. What were we just talking about? Because I had
Bernard Herrmann, Twilight Zone.
Thank you. So that show right there was one that I look back on, and my Uncle Bob absolutely loved this show. It was one of his favorite shows, was getting to watch the Twilight Zone. And when I was a little kid, I was like, man, this show is so dumb. I just want to watch cartoons, man. Why can't Uncle Bob like Courage the Cowardly Dog? Why Bob? Why can't you do it? But it wasn't until probably during the pandemic, I think it went on to Netflix. They put the entire series of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Yeah. So I just started going back and rewatching. I'm sitting there and I can remember my Uncle Bob had this huge belly, right? Didn't drink, but he had a huge beer belly. And he wore his pants, ladies and gentlemen. He was fucking 72, 73 back in the mid 2000s. So he had his pants all the way up, and he's a big guy. He's about 6'4". He's a big guy, so he had his pants all the way above his belly button with his fucking belt strapped down. And I would just remember, like, he would sit on the couch, and then we would all use his belly as a pillow, like me and my brothers and sisters and shit. So we would just lay back and we would watch Twilight Zone, man. So I have this special place in my heart for the Twilight Zone. I just went back and recently rewatched the entire series. Phenomenal show, ladies and
Well,
gentlemen.
you also want to know that that's one of John Dilworth's greatest influences.
Really,
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense.
absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, man, it's been fun. So this next one is actually really cool. Because you guys get to, there's a lot of folks that are into animation. There's a lot of folks that want to break into animation that listen to this podcast. So when we can help them out, I like to do this. But usually I have an animator on and say, what 2 books that every animation fan or anybody that's trying to break into animation should have on their shelves. But since we're going the composer route this week, what are 2 books that you think you should absolutely have if you're a fan of music, if you want to break into the music side of the animation business?
Very good question. Because there's not a whole lot.
Yeah.
There truly is not a whole lot. And you cannot get an education in, well, look, that's not true. You can go to UCLA Film School or something, and you can learn all those tricks and you can learn all that stuff and everything. But, a book that, that really affected me that has nothing to do with animation, but does have to do with scoring and how somebody thought about it against Bernard Herrmann. There's a biography of his, not an autobiography, called The Heart at Fire Center, which is all about him, what he did, how he did it, how he made choices. There is a book, which I may have right at my fingertips. Yes. It's called Musique Fantastique. It goes from the beginning of the 20th century to 1982, like with John Carpenter's The Thing and stuff like that. It's really thick. And it's only supposed to be volume 1. I've never seen 2, 3. I don't think he's ever finished it.
Yeah.
But this book is the greatest resource. 100 years of fantasy, science fiction, and horror film, a historical appreciation and overview. That's what this is. It's really good.
Beautiful.
And it's both technical, but not so technical that, the layman can't enjoy it, but technical enough so that you have a lot of great descriptions of how movie scores are put together and how TV scores are put together. We put the scores of Courage together in a very cinematic way, as I've said. And, instead of like the Mickey Mouse kind of stuff, like there is some of that. But the reality is that we were going after like melodic effects and stuff that you would remember, stuff that would be iconic to those characters. One last thing with that, because I'd forgotten to mention this before. Even though we did reuse some cues, generally what happens is in a TV series, especially now, is you create a library.
Mm-hmm.
And within that library, you pull stuff out. Well, for Courage, we wrote pretty much a different theme for every single villain.
That's insane.
And sometimes we copied them, from other stuff. Like there was some stuff from Demon in the Mattress that showed up later. But the reality was we didn't really care. We just wanted it to be cool. So it was extra work and a lot, it was very funny because I remember Winnie Chafee, the producer of the show, later on, we had lunch together. She said, oh yeah, I was talking to this guy. I don't remember what company. And the guy said, oh, that music from Courage the Cowardly Dog, it's so great. How did you guys do that? And she said, they scored every episode. And he was like, huh? Because it's like people don't do that. Yeah. And I've followed through with that. I have a show on Amazon now, which is a younger show called Space Racers. And I did the same thing. It was like, I just used, there were some funny themes, like there's a school, a head of the school board who, they're all anthropomorphic spaceships, but they're all named and look like birds. So the head of the school board is called the Vulture, right? And he's really evil and nasty. He's always doing stupid stuff. So for that particular character, I wrote the alphabet song, Mozart, that in a minor key. So it's like really creepy and silly, but you're always looking for, what is this character? Oh yeah, it's the schoolmaster. So let's put in something A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, Anyway, so that was what was so crazy about Courage, that we truly wrote. I don't know, we must have had like 2,000-3,000 cues in that show. It was huge.
That is so insane. Comparing that to what you do now, how big of a difference is it as far as 2,000 to 3,000 cues to what you're doing now?
Well, interestingly enough, this Space Racer show probably has like 2,800 cues. It's a similar kind of thing, because what I might do now is there might be more repetition of stuff, but there's still a creative process of creating the original cues, so I don't get out of it that easily. I mean, once you set a standard, it's really hard to go back.
Absolutely, man. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
You could learn from the 90s Cartoon Network.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this last question before we return to the fans question, this is actually how we connected. This is the animation recommendation. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be probably a consistent where every Halloween, this is actually, I should have said, hey, this is our Halloween episode right in the beginning, but I absolutely forgot. So ladies and gentlemen, you're about halfway through this episode now. This is our Halloween episode. It's gonna be coincided with David's episode last year and Jody's is this year. But like I said, this is the animation recommendation. This is where you get to say, hey, you should go out and say, hey, come on the show. So who should we reach out to? Obviously, like I said, David said you're gonna have Jody on. He talked to you up quite a bit in the episode. And then after we got off the phone, he was like, Jody is a great guy and he's good. He should be a good guest to come on. So like I said, I'm glad you're on here and we're talking, man. But who would be your animation recommendation?
When we talked early, I said reaching out to Marty. I will reach out to Marty. There's also a guy called Paul Scheffler, who I could reach out to him or give you a recommendation or introduction. So Paul was pretty much every other freaking voice on the show. Yeah, he's a jack of all trades. He's the guy that did Dr. Vindaloo, the Indian doctor. He's the guy. It's impossible to know that it's him because the same guy that did Dr. Vindaloo is the guy, the announcer at the beginning of the show. Lance Kerr's and everything. It's the same guy.
Really?
Yeah. And he's the snowman. He's the snowman. And it was a joke because he was doing Sean Connery, and John said, "Oh, let's use that voice as a snowman." So Paul is like everywhere. He's really funny. I've worked with him on some other stuff. He's a really, really good guy, and he's really smart and funny. And I could provide an introduction to you.
Beautiful, man. Well, those have been the animation recommendations. Now, the favorite part of my show is getting to ask the fans questions, because you guys and gals that write in have some great questions. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this episode and our Betty Cohen episode, we are not going to be able to get to even half of the questions with as many as that came in. I mean, just on a quick count before I hit this, I was scrolling through just looking at the comment count. You had probably a solid 85, 86 comments, questions.
Wow, I'll have to speak like really fast.
We'll get to as many as we can.
Okay,
ladies and gentlemen, but there was a shit ton. So if we don't ask yours next time. But the first one, man, Pussy on the Chain Wax wants to know. This one's coming from Reddit, so they got some interesting names out there. What do you think is the most haunting track created for the show? You got one that sticks out?
The one that's the most effective one for me, haunting anyone, is the Tower of Dr. Jalost.
Yeah.
I really, really like that score. It's very, very integrated into the show. I'm using the same theme every time. And then at the end, it's very dark and screwed up. And then when Jalost turns to the Jedi side at the end, he's like, it becomes very major. I like that score a lot, and a lot of fans love that show. They're constantly writing me about that show.
Yeah.
Like, how did you do it? I sat at the keyboard and I played it.
The 1,000-hour rule, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. With John Dilworth standing on my head with a whip.
Oh, that's fantastic. Man, I'm surprised it's been this long and I haven't mentioned it, but what was it Bushwick or was it just Schwick, the road? Schwick, man. Schwick. That hands down, other than Courage, the main cast, Schwick is my favorite character in damn near anything. It's just like whenever I think of somebody getting mugged, I don't know what it is. Like if you go and give a speech, ladies and gentlemen, they tell you what, picture everybody in their underwear so you don't feel scared, right? So whenever I think of like, oh man, I could have got mugged or somebody got mugged, I don't know what it is, but I always think of Schwick with a knife in the hotel bathroom. It's something about that scene that has stuck with me. And I don't do bugs like spiders, roaches. I don't do them. There's like two things I do not do in the house. I don't kill the spiders. I make somebody else do it because they just scare the shit out of me. But vomit, I don't do that shit either. But just in, like I said, anytime I think of somebody or anytime I think of like, man, this would be a funny meme or a funny gif, I'm looking for Schwick with a knife. It's just something about that character. It's just so fucking fun, man. But Haunt.
Yeah, that's a cool show. I like that show. That score is very unique.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Haunt. It's like Gershwin. Okay. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Haunt stretched out, ladies and gentlemen. His name was Haunt. How was, this one's an interesting question. How was the show explained to you? And what he means by that is Courage, to create the compositions he did. Was he able to witness the show first before creating the compositions?
Okay. So in the animation world, because it's like a factory, even though you're slowing down within the time I had to do it, we got finished episodes. Mm-hmm. So they were in color, full color, and oftentimes, well, I would not say oftentimes, I would say sometimes we would get a script in advance, and we would read through the script. If I had any questions, we'd talk to John. Sometimes John would explain something specific that he wanted before we even got the video, but we scored to what's called locked picture, the final picture, so with the time code on the bottom and all that stuff, we just went through it from left to right, all 11 minutes of each episode, and kind of did it on the fly. Yeah. So the ideas that came out were either generated by John, sometimes in a script, or Andy and I would just look at it and make it up out of thin air.
Yeah. Where are we at here? Otherwise _sane just wanted to tell you, he's like, the composition from the Hunchback episode was my favorite as a kid. Some of these, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, there were so many of them that I had to take pictures of them. So Joseph Porta 123 wants to know, is his refrigerator running?
John question. I don't know. I do remember that episode, and it's very, very pretty. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Dreyfus 2006 wants to know. I know there were plans at one time to release the soundtrack for Courage the Cowardly Dog. Why did those plans fall through? Has there been any update on that?
We're working on it. That's all I can say.
Beautiful.
John and Andy and I have had some discussions about it, and I will send you an email when I know what's going to happen.
Beautiful. Do you know Jim Lang by chance?
I do not.
No, okay. So he was the composer for Hey Arnold, and if
Yeah, I know who he was. Yeah, but I
yeah.
don't know.
So they had just released. I think they had went and pressed it like 3 times now. But they had released the soundtrack for Hey Arnold, which is, like I said, like you guys, synonymous with the show. Can't have one without the other. It's the peanut butter to their jelly, or the jelly to their peanut butter. But I think they've had to press that record like 3 times now, because every time it goes up, it sells out. And I can't imagine as soon as Courage is going to go up, like I said,
It's going to go crazy. I mean, we've talked, John and I have talked about whether we want to have a purple vinyl with black spots, and and all kinds of like little things in there. John was talking about making individual drawings for every single, just to do like cool stuff for fans. For a very long time, I have something that I call the Courage Chronicles, which are like 3 or 4 paragraphs of how we created each show.
Yeah.
Musically, which would be in that package.
Oh, that's going to be so cool once it releases.
We'll let you know for sure.
All right, and then that there is a follow-up. He or she had quite a big one. But is there any way at this point that a soundtrack could be released, or at least just the Tower of the Lost music? So they're a really big fan. I know they can't wait. So, ladies and gentlemen,
everybody loves that. Yes, there is, and I think that we're looking now at. We're going to go on, believe it or not, like the 25th anniversary of Courage or something, and so. But we don't have to release it on the 25th. If we get all the ducks in a row, we'll put Courage the Cowardly Dog almost 25 years or something like that. We'll do something like that.
So cool. Or after 25 years, you know what I mean? Hopefully it doesn't take that long, but
exactly. It won't take that long. I mean, I have all the music, and we've talked about a lot of this stuff. I mean, COVID kind of screwed a lot of shit up with, like, because I used to hang out with John a lot, where we haven't seen each other in a year or something, which reminds me, I got to even call. But yeah, we're working on it.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, like you said, stay tuned. Or at CJ, I apologize for butchering you guys' names. The Cats theme, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the Cats theme is some pretty deep bass that doesn't really come across on standard TVs of the time. How often did you or was it important to consider the technical limitations of a basic TV when writing music for the show? I think that's a very smart question.
It's a very smart question. So here's what you need to know. At the time, Courage and all the other shows that you mentioned were broadcast. Cartoon Network broadcast in mono, not in stereo. So we mixed everything in stereo and beat the crap out of it, and then listened to everything in mono to try to get the most robust thing that we could. I've listened to the DVDs, on like my home TV with big speakers. It sounds pretty good. I mean, part of the problem is when you, squish stereo to mono, stuff vaporizes essentially, So that's what the problem is. Should we be able to do this soundtrack thing, we will probably remaster everything to make it a little bit more robust, and also to be stereo. But the Courage soundtrack does exist in stereo, and it's really very, very robust.
Man, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. What were your most important inspirations when creating the music? Do you have a couple that you go to?
I would say first and foremost were the actors, the dialogue. We looked at Courage. I talked about leaf motives before. We looked at Courage like we were scoring an opera. So the dialogue, like, what do these voices sound like? What does Muriel sound like? What does Eustace sound like? What do these characters all sound like? So the music that went under there, first and foremost, we wanted it to fit between the sound design or below the sound design and the dialogue and the vocals. So we spent a lot of time on that. And the next thing again was like, what did that scene evoke? What did that character evoke? What did they say to us? you can name, 10 shows, and I'll give you like how we came up with that particular theme.
Yeah.
For instance, this will give you guys an example. So the snowman stuff. So I had this sample CD of American Indian, Native American drums, all kinds of stuff, little pieces of screaming, Apaches, all kinds of stuff that we baked into the theme, along with these really icy sort of sounds, computer sounds and sounds on the synth, and put them all together. So it was like, that was like the landscape, because unless I started to play some kind of James Bond thing for Sean Connery, I couldn't do that. So we opted to make this crazy sort of Icelandic space that was very vast and windblown, and there was and so like that was what we used. It was like, okay, that fits great. John would come in, I love it, next.
Yeah.
So everything was dictated by like what those scenes were and what those characters were.
Beautiful. Thank you for breaking that down. We talked about that one a little bit. Man, there's a lot of people want to know about the soundtrack. This one's cool. What's the name of that really suspenseful music that would play whenever there was a disaster, like the tornado during Little Muriel? It kind of sounded like the kind of music you would hear in a disaster movie. Okay.
Yes. The short answer is yes. Basically, there was a kind of a sample of a swirling wind kind of sound, okay? And within that sound, I would put some horns, Andy would put some horns, or so it was kind of like a little bit of a take on the Wizard of Oz, but not really no Wicked Witch thing, but essentially it was a created sound. It was a created sound based on this wind stuff that was going around and around. And if I remember correctly, we also put it inside of like a Leslie speaker for a Hammond organ that has those kind of, swirly sounds. Everything in that thing was swirly. We stopped and started it. It was the same sound. And sometimes I use that in different shows, only I played it backwards.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, in 1,000 Years of Courage, for instance, we used the same sound. And then when they were coming back into the 20th century, I would play it backwards because it would be the opposite of what happened in the front. Just like simple shit like that.
You say it's simple, but that's so fucking smart.
It took a long time to put it together. I know.
Okay, here we go. What was your compositional process for balancing sounds that were whimsical and cartoonish with sounds that were darker and more serious? Do you think any instruments or sounds are inherently one or the other?
That's a really, really smart question. I would say we change in cartoons. You change sounds so often, even though we didn't necessarily score this like a regular, Warner Brothers cartoon or something. You could start and stop on a dime. So there could be a really dark thing, and then you would burst the bubble with something silly. So it would be, again, what was the voice doing? What was the scene dictating? And if the scene dictated that we go somewhere else, that we go to someplace really dark, we go somewhere really light, we just went there. It was like there was no hesitation. It was just like, it's changing. The scene is changing. So we have to go with the scene.
Got you. Just progression, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Stand Beside Jordan. The first one isn't so much a question, but I just want to say Last of the Star Makers is the most beautiful episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog. The soundtrack alone is very heartfelt and perfectly accompanies the feelings evoked by the story being told. What was the inspiration for the song The Man in Gauze and King Ramses' Curse? It always made me laugh how painfully bad Courage, Muriel, and Eustace thought it was. Haha.
Okay. two completely different questions. Okay, so Star Maker was absolutely 80% of that show was Andy. Andy like saw that thing and started to play that da, 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 da. And I was like, dude, that's it, go. So he really wrote a bulk of that material, and then we orchestrated it and changed it up and did different things with it. But it was like Andy's prowess as a keyboard player, and he just had a wonderful feeling for that thing. It literally came out of nowhere. He just started playing it and it was perfect. As far as the Man in Gauze is concerned, that's a very funny question, because so we got it. We had a like an old school Victrola, like playing with the Edison thing, and they're all, and Eustace and Muriel are screaming and everything. And Andy and I said, what the hell is this? What kind of music would make them do that? So he said, well, we're going to do like really bad disco. And that's what's going to drive him crazy. So like we said, da, 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 da. So I start singing King Ramses, and Andy's going, the man in Gauze, the man in Gauze. And then I'm like, he's no Santa Claus. And I used my like best faux opera voice. It was really bad. And it's so funny how those little iconic things, I did a thing at a Comic-Con, and these kids came in and they had turned it into a ringtone, and it was on their phone. And they like it was hilarious. I called up Warner Bros. And said, why isn't this shit a ringtone? What do you anyway, that was exactly what it was. It was like the worst thing we could think of was really bad disco. And that's what we did.
Oh man. Ordinary_student wants to know. Shit, I think
I'm sure you're not ordinary, sir.
Big fan of your work in the series. Here are my questions. How was the creative process that led you to compose the opening and ending theme of the series? Are there any upcoming projects you are working on that you can talk about? Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Okay, so the opening and closing thing was, we fooled around with that a little bit. And because there was a voiceover already over the TV, welcome to Kursk, I can't remember the exact thing. So we were like looking for, how could we do something that would go with that voice? And see, that was the first thing we did. We did that right after we got the show, and we didn't really know completely what the show was or what it was going to be about. So we had submitted a couple of things, and John said, no, these are hicks. These are total hicks. So you got to do something that's really hicky.
Hick that shit up.
Yeah, but it's also got to be stupid, and it's also got to be scary. So the first thing was, we got a friend of ours to come in and play pedal steel. That theme is there. I'm like slamming through guitar and some ukulele and stuff. He was playing some ukulele. So we had that main theme. And then in the middle, Andy and I started going, ho, 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 which we stole from the Wizard of Oz. Ho, yo, yo. So we went, ho, ho, ho. And that was the thing that was showing, all of the stills of the monsters on the TV, and so we added some really low stuff on that. And then at the end, it exploded. And Andy went, holla! I didn't even know what he said, but it ended cutting his thing in half, and John loved it. So we played the whole thing. And in the end, we came in and we played like 2 chords and started playing stuff over it. John came in and started to be a sheep. He's going, bleh, and all this stuff. And we were all doing these really stupid animal noises. And then at the very end, John put in Stupid Dog from Eustace. He said, oh, that's where it's got to go. It's really like, we literally jammed it down. We just jammed it down. It was just having the melody to bounce off of with that played on a lap pedal steel guitar, gave it that little country thing. And so we gave John his hick thing. Oh yeah, and also there was a a Jew's harp, and they're like, dong, dong, no, 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 no. So it was just an amalgam of stuff. And we sent it to Cartoon Network, and they said, this is perfect. So it was an auspicious beginning.
You should sell a T-shirt that says "Hick that shit up," and it's just John.
I like that. I might do that. That's good.
Yeah.
Except I can't have Courage on there because I get sued. Well, ask John.
Yeah, just put John in there, and he's pointing like that. Just hick that shit up. Dominic DeSantis wants to know: was Doc Gerbil's world purposely given a small world feel, almost to get on the same level as it?
Exactly right. I mentioned that earlier in the show, but what happened was John came in on that, and Andy, John, and I made that together. So John said, hey, let's do something like It's a Small World after all. And I said, hey, we can't have a real song. It's got to be terrible, like really stinky. So Andy and I started going, it's Doc Gerbil's world. It's Doc Gerbil's, same shit over and over again, like a loop. And so I'm playing like bass, and Andy's playing accordion, and we put tuba in there and all kinds of stuff. So that's John and Andy and I singing It's Doc Gerbil's world. That's exactly how it happened. And it was absolutely a rip on It's a Small World, because there's all that shit in the background with deodorants, and it was like going through the tunnel in Small World.
There's two songs that I could really think about, and then it's just like it's instantly going to be here for at least 6 to 8 hours. It's a Small World, and then the Menomina song from the Sesame Street. It's just like anytime, and if anything sounds like Menomina, it'll get right in here. I'm going to think about this fucking song for the next 8 hours. While I'm trying to sleep, Jody.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, this song
You can blame this guy DeSantis who just asked that question.
What a dick. No, I like that question. It was fun.
It was a great question.
Cosmic Comics Production. They wanted to know, do you hear specific music have a general idea of what you want in your head when you're shown a particular scene to score? Or do you try lots of ideas out and see what fits best with the tone of each scene? Thanks for all the inspiration.
Thank you. Yes and no. It's both. Sometimes I immediately hear it. If I'm working, with Andy, sometimes he immediately hears it. Sometimes we hear it together. Sometimes we do a little bit of experimenting. A lot of times the experimenting is like, oh, let's try this. Like, we'll pick up an instrument that we can't really play. Andy is a terrible guitar player, but he plays it really badly. And like I said, I don't really play flute or something, so I'll play flute. So, we try to come up with stuff that's just stupid or scary. And it's also a lot of times we bust the balloon of scary, like the scary thing will happen, then we'll go pop. We'll do something else that just makes you laugh for a minute.
Yeah.
The whole idea is a series of contrasts. So we're always looking for like, how, again, it's the same thing. How can we serve the voice, the dialogue? What is this character? Who is this character? Some shows, for instance, required very sort of dark, non-musical stuff. Like, for instance, in The Queen of the Black Puddle, she is very scary. She's a witch, but there's no real music. It's all darkness with little themes creeping in and out, little things popping in and out, little flutes, little backwards things. So we'd create these layers of stuff that would be just as iconic as a melody. Like you could know, oh, I know what show that's in. There are fans that have said, oh, I know exactly what that is without even looking at it, So sometimes it was just that dark, weird stuff that wasn't melodic, but still called attention to itself in a good way. Yeah. So it wasn't, destroying the dialogue or, David and I discussed a lot of this stuff later on because we didn't work together at that time. We knew each other, but we discussed, how he said, dude, you guys were scoring my scripts like perfectly, and I never talked to you. You know, it was like, well, we just listened. I don't know what else to say.
That's awesome. This one I don't understand, so maybe you might be able to get what they're asking. But the Kevin Piastra, I think,
Okay.
wants to know, what was a typical spotting session like with Dilworth? What's a spotting session?
Okay. It's a good question. So spotting is sitting down with the director or the producer or the music supervisor and deciding what spots in the movie or TV series need music. Needs
Gotcha.
music. So they call it the spots. So it's a spotting session. So John would, and we would sit down often. As the series progressed, he didn't spot with us anymore because he said they know what they're doing. I don't know, you know. So he would come in and he'd say, you know, I kind of like this here. I kind of like this sound here. But he would always accompany by, this is going to be so. He was so excitable. He was so hilarious, you know, because he was so enthusiastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would say, I want something dark here, or I want something funny here. If he had an actual idea, like, you know, something from, you know, pop or classical or jazz or something, he'd say, oh, do that there, you know, and then we would write notes and we would go ahead. We were still given latitude. He would often describe a feeling rather than a kind of music.
Yeah.
You know, he'd say, I want this to be like really dark, man, really dark. It's scary.
Is that
it's
easier?
Really scary. You'd go like that.
For you?
I beg your pardon?
Is that easier for you when you know what kind of a feeling they're kind of trying to?
It's like yes and no. You know, I know composers like who love to have like a temp score.
Yeah.
You know, like a temp, because it gives them an idea of what the director or the producer want. When you have a close relationship with the producer or director, it's easier for me for him to come in and say, oh, I want this.
Yeah. Even
though sometimes it's very obscure. You try to figure out what the hell he's talking about, you know, and I would always go back to John didn't speak in musical terms. He always spoke in, you know, feelings. And also one interesting thing about John too, which sometimes aided us and sometimes got in the way. He often didn't see the difference between music and sound effects, sound design. You know, it would be like, and we did a lot of sound design for the show that was music, you know, that was musical and oriented. But so he would, and during mix sessions, I mixed every episode with John and our mix engineer. And he and I would decide if a sequence was too crowded. So John would say, I hate to do it, Jody, but we got to take the music out here because I want this sound, you know, this sound effect. I say, okay, great. Other times he'd say, oh man, let's take the sound effect off. It wrecks the music. So, you know, it would be like whatever struck him.
Yeah.
So it would be the same thing, no matter what we did in those spotting sessions or subsequently, he would always have something to say in the final mix that would change stuff up.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Sometimes I would even have to score stuff or cut something or move something from another sequence, you know, because he would say, oh, this would go better here.
Great question, Kevin. And
yes.
then,
thank you.
Where we were at, I just fat fingered this thing. And then this is the last one. And I think this is a pretty good one to end on. Have any of the songs that you have ever composed for the series ever influenced how an episode played out? Obviously, I think you said at the beginning of an episode that you get them where they're ready to go. You got 5 days to get the music ready for this one. But if they ever come to you and say, hey, the way this goes might have, you know, impacted a future episode?
Yes. So these were, there was a bunch of songs that were built into the scripts. And these songs would be done before we scored anything, sometimes 6 months before.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, there's an episode, The Ride of the Valkyries. All of those songs were composed and recorded before the rest of the episode. Because, they're done in a totally separate session and all that stuff. And also, they animate the mouth movements to that, right? So it's the way animation works, right? That one, there was a really goofy snowman song. There were a bunch of songs. Yeah, so it would, I would say the reverse is true. In The Ride of the Valkyries, John wanted this crazy sort of Wagnerian opera kind of vibe in the whole thing. So the vocals were recorded to a piano track, and then we filled the orchestration in around it. Other stuff was recorded the same way, to a click track or whatever, and whoever was going to sing it would sing it. But it would be consistent with what the rest of the score was going to end up sounding like.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Does that answer the question?
I think so. I mean, I think it does, man. Because, like you said, they wanted to know if anything had done before the 5 days, essentially. So yeah, man, with that answer, I think it would. Anyways, I mean, we didn't ask a lot of these questions that we had written down because you did a very good job at navigating. I was having fun just sitting here listening to you talk, man, because you would navigate things, and I was like, well, if I butt in here, I'm going to sound really, really dumb. So hopefully he's going, oh, yep, he's going to go into greater detail. So this is really, really cool. I don't get to look as dumb as I usually do. So
it's okay. I mean, you can't shut me up if I start talking. Sorry.
Oh no, man. I really enjoy when I can sit back and I can listen to stories, because when you guys come on, I try to either read if you guys got blog posts or if you guys have gotten other interviews out there. So I try to listen to and read as much as I can before. That way we don't kind of tread on the same water, because that gets really boring. I mean, obviously courage is always going to be brought up, probably pretty quickly. I mean, there's certain things that stick out. And when I find out, like, oh shit, you worked on courage, we've got to talk about courage, because David had talked about, you got him in the background right there, the big Clifford, the big red dog, so it's just like courage is always going to be, in my opinion, like my favorite thing you ever did, because that was what I grew up on. That was where at that height of, I guess, curiosity or whatever it is when you're becoming, a kid to a teenager to an adult.
Sure.
Transition period. That's what sticks to you the most. And when I think of courage, it's the same thing I think of when I think of Harold. It's just synonymous. The cartoon couldn't go without the music, and the music couldn't go without the cartoon.
Thank you. And it's a very iconic show. There's no ifs or buts about it. And what you're saying kind of makes me smile, because John has said to me on numerous occasions, Jody, no matter what you do, it's going to say composer of Courage the Cowardly Dog on your grave. And I'm like, thanks a lot, John. What happens if I save the Ukraine? You mean that's courage is more important than that? Give me a break. Anyway, he always says it's funny.
Oh, it's definitely going to be courage, man. He's a funny character, man. Because I've heard some interesting stories about him, and it's always, this is the most I've ever heard about John as far as a clip goes. Because I think Linda and I've talked about him. I can't remember if it was online or if it was off the record, but I remember him coming up quite often, and I always smile, because it's like you listen to him talk and you watch him talk and you're like, man, this is an interesting cat. And then you hear the stories and like him running in there and beating the shit out of Andy, or Andy running in there and beating the shit out of him. That's some funny shit. So
they were like brothers from another mother. It was really funny. And, John is very tall.
Yeah.
John's like 6'5" or something. He's really tall. And Andy, I'm short. Andy's taller than I am. So I guess if he had got me on the floor, I would be dead, and you have had half of the Courage episodes. But yeah, John is a great character, and very original character, brilliant, eccentric. And as David and I have always talked, John created the perfect machine for television. I mean, this Courage show with the two protagonists, and Courage, Muriel being, the good guy and Eustace being the bad guy and all the other stuff. It's really amazing, that he created this thing that fit so many different, in some ways, I wish it would come back. In other ways, I mean, I don't know if you could ever go home again, because it was very special with all those people at that time. But then again, they made like 37,000 Star Wars, movies. So like, but John really did create something extraordinary, and he had a great team of writers, brilliant team of writers, and brilliant animators, colorists, everybody. We all really worked really hard to make the best show that we could.
Yeah, and you guys, like I said, you guys made a phenomenal show. Where can folks go to find you if they want to say, hey, Jody, I really like that thing you did? You got a website or anything like that? Or you got anything you're working on?
At the present moment, there's a website that's kind of in disarray. They can go to jodygray.com, JODYGRAY.com, or I have a regular email, an old email that I just use specifically for students and people inquiring about this, which is Tunes for Food, TUNES, the number 4 FOOD at AOL.com. That's how old it is. So check that out. If I'm happy to answer anything, please go ahead, send me shit.
Yes, and those links will be in the description below, so you can just go and click, and then you can go and
fine. And I apologize for the website right now. It's all being like revamped.
Oh no, but it's perfectly fine, man. And since right before we like to wrap up, man, I do have one more question, and it's something that I should ask David, because he helped write the show. But I figure you're here, you're the next foremost expert on Courage that I've had on, and I got to imagine, man, you said AOL, old school network there, old school email. But Courage was doing something before Google, I think, man. He was Googling before Googling was Googling. And I really feel like either John and everybody on that crew should be cut a little bit of a royalty check from old Microsoft here. How do you feel about that, man? Do you think that's just happenstance? Do you think the folks over at Google, they're like, man, this fucking dog, he's out here solving mysteries and shit in the middle of nowhere with the shittiest internet? This is dial-up days, ladies and gentlemen.
It was dial-up days, because you heard it. You heard the dial-up sound.
Literally in the middle of nowhere. They literally say that.
They will never give us a dime.
Bastard.
That's all I could say. They'll never give us a dime, no matter what we prove. But it was a very cool addition. I to be honest with you, I don't know if that was a contribution of David's or of John. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that the computer was an incredibly important part of, Courage's hunt for shit that he needed answers to, that he was able to interact with the computer in a lot of really cool ways. And I don't remember another show at the time that was so kind of, certainly not a dog that was that computer savvy. I don't know. That would be a question I should ask David. Or you can email him or something, because I don't know who came up with that idea. That's kind of cool.
Was a dick too.
He's a total dick. He's a total dick. He's this British guy, Simon Preble. He was a really nice guy, but he played the computer to the hilt.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's the AI you worry about right there. That's the AI you worry about. But yeah, man, like I said, this has been a real blast, man. We're gonna have you and David come back on together, and then you guys can talk and swap.
Oh, that'll be fabulous. We'll never shut up.
That's perfectly cool.
We're the dog composers. Clifford, Courage. What can I say?
You got Scooby on the horizon. You gonna do Scooby Doo next? Well, I mean,
we already did Scooby. We did the Scooby movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going on. There's some weird shit going on at Warner Brothers right now.
Yeah.
Where they're like canceling stuff left and right. I don't know what's going on. There was supposed to be another Scoob movie, but I think it got canceled. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard time to be an animation fan. I mean, there's still quite a bit of animation getting made, but there's so many folks losing their job right now because of regime changes. I'm not an expert on any of this shit going on, but it's very sad to see so many productions getting shut down and so many folks getting let go. They're either in the middle, almost done with something, just starting up and ramping up, and then they're asked to go home because the network doesn't have any value for what they are working on.
Yeah, it looks to me like, from what I've read about Warner Brothers, though I have no inside information, but from the stuff that's been released, it looks like maybe Warner Brothers is going for theatrical features and less for the television elements of what they've been doing. And that Scooby-Doo has had like 2 things a year out forever. I don't know, the only Scooby-Doo that I've ever done was the Scooby-Doo Courage thing. And we got called for Courage because Jay Bastian, who's the head of Warner Brothers Animation, we worked with him and he knew we would give Courage not short shrift. Although doing something that features both Scooby and Courage was somewhat schizophrenic. We were trying to, do Scooby, which is very specific, and do Courage, which is very specific, and try to find a medium between those 2 things. And it was hard sometimes.
Where does that one rank as far as difficulty for you?
Wasn't really difficult. It was just that when we did stuff that we might do for Courage, it was oftentimes too dark or too weird. We were encouraged to do weird stuff, and we did it. And sometimes it didn't quite work with Scooby as well. So we kind of had to find this medium between Courage and Scooby. And I think they did a nice job of blending the animation styles. It had a nice 2D thing. And you saw, the original artwork from Courage and some of the original artwork Scooby. So I think I can't say difficult. The only thing that was difficult was we did it during COVID. So Andy and I were not in the same room. We were working by computer all the time. We're working on Zoom. We're doing all, so we're used to being in the same room with each other. And that was like a little trying.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing with the people at Warner Brothers. They were, I was getting calls from the producer in her kitchen and stuff. It was like, I'm sure everybody went through that during COVID. I teach, songwriting and stuff. And, I've been on Zoom since like 2020 teaching. So it's a little weird.
Yeah, it really is, man. I'm hoping one day we might be able to go back to some kind of normalcy. But
I hope so, for your kids' sake.
Yeah, I mean, well, luckily with Florida, it's the wild, wild west. So, anything short of spitting in each other's mouths, it's pretty much open here in Florida. And you just look on the news and you got some wild shit going on in Florida. But we've gotten very lucky. I mean, with the exception of, it's come up a couple of times so the fans know. We lost my father-in-law to complications from COVID back in February.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It's definitely been a tough time because he was a couple weeks away from his 62nd birthday, man. And it's just way too young as it is. Way too nice of a guy. I mean, I've seen so many horrible people in my life that are still walking around, and I never wish death on anybody, but it's just like, why did it have to be probably the sweetest person I've ever met? The guy that would literally give you the shirt off of his back. It's just, it sucks, man. But, with us being down here in Florida, it's just a lot of things have been open. It was very difficult at the beginning, like it was with most people in COVID. But my state didn't have it nearly as bad. We get criticized all the time for, oh, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. It's hindsight is always 2020. Everybody wants to armchair quarterback at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure.
But it's just like it could have been a lot worse is really what I'm getting at. We got really lucky that it didn't get as bad as it was, or bad as it could have been. But yeah, man, I really hope that, you know, my kids get to grow up normal, man, because there's so much shit that's just restricted now because of it.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully we can look at this like they've been talking about. We would look at it one day, like maybe one day this will just be the next flu. You know, it won't be so fucking politicized, and I don't want to get that negative and that depressing, but yeah.
I agree. You know, it was in New York, it was kind of a nightmare because everybody's on top of each other.
Oh yeah.
You know, it was really difficult. And you know, I went for my bi-yearly checkup, and the woman at the hospital told me that at one time there were just bodies piled to the ceiling because they didn't have body bags.
That's
so like 30 feet high. You know, it was just awful. And you know, so we're not going back there. And I think this one caught a lot of people with their pants down. I just hope that there is a degree of normalcy if it comes back. It is coming back. There's no doubt about it. You know, but hopefully it won't be so crazy and restrictive the next time something comes along. Something would have been learned from this. That's all I can say.
I really do, but I really feel like we are not a proactive people. And by people, I mean just human beings in general. Very few of us are proactive. Everybody is very reactive. You know, it never, like, nobody ever worries about anything until it knocks on your door. Right?
That's true.
You know,
That's
so
true.
like I said, hopefully we do not have short-term memory when it comes to any of this shit. Good, bad, and indifferent. There was so much shit we can learn from these last 2 years going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
like, you know, but I feel like let's not end it on such a depressing note. But you know,
let's do some Looney Tunes. Anyway.
Quick, play us out, Jody. But no, it's just like I said, this has been a real blast. David, thank you for setting this up. This has been a real treat for me.
Hey, David.
Happy Halloween, ladies and gentlemen.
Happy Halloween. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And thank you to everybody out there that submitted questions. I hope I answered them. And I hope that in the bulk of the interview, there were enough of them answered. And please reach out to me. It may take me a day or two to get back, but reach out.
Absolutely, man. And he's been Jody. I've been Julian. This has been a What's My Head podcast. And it's been another piece of your childhood. Good night.
Thanks, man.
My guest next week is longtime Disney veteran Rick Farmelo. Enjoy the teaser.
This is a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And this young woman came to my table, and she was looking at my stuff and all my drawings, and you know, I'd sign stuff and do drawings for people and all my characters. And she's looking at them, and my wife Christy's telling her, "Oh, this is Rick Farmelo. He did blah 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 blah." And she goes, "I know." She goes, "I know who he is." She goes, "Oh yeah, I know who he is." And she goes, "Oh okay." She goes, "I have some of his stuff on my wall at home. Cells or something like that." So she's like, "Oh, okay." So she comes to me and starts, and so I kind of start talking to her, and I said, "Yeah, I worked on Aladdin, and I did a Boo. I animated a Boo." And she goes, "Yeah, I know. Yeah." She's like, just kind of I'm kind of wondering, it's kind of a odd. She wasn't like, "Oh gosh, can you do me a drawing?" She wasn't doing that. She was just kind of listening to me. And she said, "Yeah, I know who you are." And then she says, "Well," she said, "my dad was the genie."
Wow.
And at first it didn't register. I'm like, oh, you mean your dad drew the genie? I was sort of thinking, and then I'm realizing, and I'm like, "But I know Eric's daughters, and you're not one of Eric's." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you're Robin's daughter." And she says, "Yeah, he was my dad." I'm like, "Oh my God." And what I had was that she was looking at for such a long time, was I did a drawing when he passed away. I was working at a studio, and I just did a drawing of Abu with his hat off and his head down and looking at the lamp that was open and empty. And it just said, "Bye, Genie." That's all it said. And I signed, you know, I just did it as a little tribute, and I posted it on Facebook. And dude, everybody somehow got a hold of it, and were sharing it all over. And I came in, I just around midnight, I put this thing, just a little That's all I did, just a drawing of a boo with this thing and this little tear. And it had gone viral, overnight. And I came in the morning and people were, hey, I love your drawing of a boo. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, it's all over. It's on Instagram and everything. Anyway, but so I did a color version of it, kind of really nice color version. And that's what she was looking at. And she was like, yeah, that's my dad. And I'm like, oh my God, you got to let me sign this. He goes, no, it's okay. No, please. So I gave it to her and signed it. And we got a picture together and stuff. But I just thought that was so sweet that she came by and, just was very unassuming, but just sort of said, oh yeah, I know who you are. And just looking at that drawing, little tribute drawing I did for her, about her dad.